Hey guys, Thomas Cecily Jr. here, aka Mustached. I'm here to review the movie An Eye for an Eye 3. I have not seen the previous two, but I decided to check this one out because fuck it. Yeah, I just like to do movie reviews sometimes, and I decided to check out this one for purposes, and quite frankly, I actually thoroughly enjoyed this movie. It was pretty refreshing to get this after the various failures I have seen previously. So, anyways, this movie starts off with this man who I'll just call the Doc riding on this road, and he sees a car in front of him. So he proceeds to move to the second car in front of him and try to move it. But a this other man, who I will refer to as the Masked Man, pops up behind him and brings up a chloroform handkerchief, I believe that's the word I'm looking for, and knocks him out. So, he is brought. It cuts to him talking to this woman, who I will only refer to as the woman, because these characters throughout the entire movie do not have names. I'm pretty sure. So the masked man says that he has removed all traces of this dock, and the woman says she kind of wants to let him go, but the masked man insists that the doc stays until he bears this apparent truth. So the doc wakes up, and he screams out for help. So the masked man arrives down there, and he mentions that a rape happened. So, to just do a little quick recap, the doc is being accused of rape, essentially, from the woman. So the masked man mentions this party that this doc attended, and in the process, party happened, and he was trying to get the doc to essentially tell a story that mentioned this this tire debacle being a falsehood, and coming in with the woman. So the masked man mentions how he has been to Iraq and knows how to deal with people who do not know how, who essentially hide information. So he goes back up to the woman, who insists that they do something else. She is trying to avoid the main discussion at hand. And at this point of the movie, again, this movie I think is really good. I think it does a really clever thing of starting to make you doubt the woman's words, because again, she's constantly trying to avoid the subject matter. So, she oddly mentions the masked man being at the party, and he sort of seems a bit like to freak out at that. He's like, no, we didn't meet until a certain point. We didn't meet until afterwards. He keeps on insisting this throughout the movie. It gets pretty interesting at that point. Anyway, so she talks about waking up and being on this sort of cart thing, being tied up and being, taken from behind, essentially, but couldn't remember much else. So the masked man makes some tea, and he takes this, pill as well. So the masked man returns to the dock, yelling at him, and then turning on the camera, insisting that he confess, the dock that being. So he turns the camera off and then begins to place a plastic bag over the doc's mouth and gets him to pass out. So, after that, he is, he like waits a little bit, then checks back in, wakes up the doc with some really cold water, and the mess man sticks a little needle in the doc after he like is like, oh, I need a food or whatever. So the mess man says, uh, he's still talking about Iraq and stuff like that. So he says that like, when people like him are sent out, it's always a political thing, and that being when people refer to them as heroes, soldiers essentially as heroes, but only are sent out there to either kill or be killed. So the masked man is trying to avoid this, what he assumes is this doc's ploy to get him to talk, to get him to see the doctor as a more humane character, talk about their past, stuff of that nature. So the masked man hits the doctor with a hammer on the knee. So the doc starts blurting out various names at this point, trying to get out any way possible, and gets a hammer to the face because of that. So the masked man goes back to the girl, and he kind of reiterates, like, he didn't know your name. And oddly enough, she mentions the masked man being there again. And again, he's like, no, I wasn't there. So she mentions being cut. And this is where things shift from, her sort of like avoiding being talked to now she's mentioning being cut, and she actually shows it. Her breast being cut like via these like slit bars. So the masked man freaks out at this sight and goes straight back to the dock and cuts off his leg for doing this. So the masked man goes off on his own, and he kind of thinks about what happened. Like, he kind of starts to have the vision of like piecing the event of the woman getting raped, and he's kind of getting off on it. It's a bit of a weird scene, but it does oddly make sense later on. But I'll get to that later on. So, anyways, the woman talks about eventually joins him and talks about her also having like thinking about what had happened, having a wet dream thinking about the rape afterwards, and how apparently that is actually something normal. That's actually something that I was unaware of. That I don't know if that's actually a thing or not, if that's something that actually happens. Anyways, while that's going on upstairs, one of the Dark's arm braces, because he was tied up the entire time, finally hangs loose. So he's able to free himself. And he's able to pick himself up with a pipe because he had lost his leg, and proceeds to try to move along down the lower area. So the doc goes further along, and he actually sees this dead body. And again, now there's another shift of like, oh, so now the guy upstairs is just straight up a killer. Like he's been killing people here. Uh, and again, the woman's story, like since it's as vague as it was, it was like almost trying to indicate like maybe the doc wasn't the one responsible, because there was this indication that there were other people at this party. So even the doc asked like, how do you know uh one of the other people at this party didn't do this? So there again, there's this constant like shift of like, who is actually who is like responsible here? Who's doing this stuff? Was it the doc? I don't know, maybe. Anyways, he ends up towards the staircase, and that's actually almost ends up heading towards the main house, because this area is attached to the house via this pipeline or whatever room this is in between. But as it would turn out, the masked man is a very light sleeper and heads downstairs hearing the noises, and he decides to check out a television very briefly, and the doc waits for a bit. So the masked man, as he's moving about grabbing some food, drops this bowl, but as he sees the door being unlocked, the one that led to the area, he takes his sandals off to be even more quiet and heads back upstairs. So the doc heads for the keys, but is once again chloroformed and passed out. So the masked man claims that the woman was the one responsible for killing the people, and she is saying that he killed them. So now there's this new dynamic of them not trusting each other or whatever. So the doc is once again tied up, this time with even less clothes on. He is left with just his boxers or briefs or whatever, which one it is, on this table with the chainsaw on the tip of the edge of the I don't want to say bed. It's like a desk, I guess. So the doc actually mentions the dead body, or dead bodies that he saw, and now he's the one mentioning that the masked man was there as well. So now this is all starting to turn on the masked man. Like the doc's saying, "Oh, you killed these people. You're clearly gonna just kill me. Like, how do you even know I did this or whatever?" Like he's going down that route now. And how he knew this woman from before, and there is a potential like a plot hole that I do want to talk about, but I'll talk about that a little bit afterward. So, the masked man goes to the woman and is like, "How did we meet exactly?" He's like starting to be in denial himself of what's going on. So when he returns to the doc wants to confess. So the masked man gets the camera, and the doc confesses. And the masked man proceeds to ask if he had done this to other women, that being the whole thing with the breast, as mentioned earlier, and rape. If he had raped other women previous to this, because the masked man came to the conclusion that this couldn't have possibly have been the first time. There had to be more. Actually, he kind of insisted this throughout the earlier in the movie, of like insisting like that this couldn't have been your first time. You had to have had like done this with several other women. And he confesses to that as well. He's like, yeah, I did it. Like he was trying to like, just like clearly he was lying, but the masked man bought it, and in the process of buying it, he actually does. That masked man actually goes off on the dock, cutting off his penis in the process, because the masked man is like, you're never gonna use that ever again. So the masked man wants to leave the doc at the hospital afterwards, after the confession has been done. So, this is where I will say, spoiler alert, because I do think this movie is actually good enough to warrant a spoiler alert. So, the masked man and the woman are watching the news, and as they are watching the news, it's talking about the situation going on of like a guy being captured or whatever, or disappearing in general, and the woman is like, oh, you, and the masked man like turns off the TV, but it comes on again with that doctor they mentioned earlier, and the doc actually talks to him via mind, and from this point, the woman who we finally learn her name at the end of the movie. Her name was Christine, and Christine vanishes, and the masked man is freaking out. He's like checking the drugs that he took, trying to figure out what the heck is going on. He looks in the mirror and he takes off his shirt to reveal that he was the one who was cut on his nipples. He was the one that was cut with these marks. And she appears again, like she revamps into the story. And she says, this is you. This happened to you. You did this as well. Like, you killed these people in order to do this, in order to catch this guy. You killed these other two guys at that party to do this, to get this vengeance. So, the masked man chloroforms the doc and brings him to the hospital as he intended to do. And the masked man moves the other bodies that were below and cleans up the entire underground area. And as he finds this note, he gets a flashback of the doc raping him. So, the masked man and this fake Christine, get joined by this other clearly fake woman, this illusion of a woman, and she says like, oh, now we gotta finish this. That's what she says, as they are like at the doc's wife's house, I believe, and that's how the movie ends. And as I said very early on, I thoroughly enjoyed this movie. I thought it was very well acted. I thought it was very simple, like, setup here. But man, do they keep the, like, who did what aspect. They do that really, really good here. You start to wonder, like, did the doc actually do these things pretty early on? like, this guy seems so mysterious, and then you're like, man, this masked guy is doing a lot of stuff, seemingly for almost no reason for this woman who's like, oh, I want to do this and I want to do that. I don't want to talk about this stuff. Only to find out that the woman, Christine, was a part of like his mind, a part of him. He created her as a means of escape, as a means of forgetting, like placing a foot holder. And again, I did mention like a potential plot hole of like, there is a scene where he is talking to her, Christine, and I believe when the doc mentions a little later on, like, oh, you were talking to her. Uh, but I think the movie actually does a really good job, even if that was a plot hole. Like there was enough bits in this movie to indicate like how the doc would perceive that, like the two different voices. Like I'm assuming that the I mean, it's really hard to say that when we see the masked man, and the woman speak separately all the time. So again, I don't know if that's a plot hole. I don't know if like there's ever a point. There's never a point where the masked man speaks in a more feminine voice, and I think that would have helped out, especially if they just had a very quick thing at near the end of the movie where he speaks with a more feminine voice, and it just so happens to sound a little bit more similar to Christine. But that never does happen, so again, I don't know if that's a plot hole of the doc, hearing the voices and assuming that there's two people up there instead of just the one. But yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed this movie. Again, it kept me, like, wondering, like, who's doing what here? And the reveal of the woman being fake was a pretty good, like, a pretty good twist in how they pulled that off. Again, pretty effective. And him end up being the victim, again, pretty good twist. They bring it in just at the right time. And the second woman, the one we see at the very end, even when she has just one line, you're able to tell what that character is from that one line. You can tell that this other fake woman, the second one that he created, was a clear indication of his time at Iraq, like his PTSD, that side of him, coming out and saying that we need to finish this. That was a very clear indication of what that character was designed to be because of the writing from earlier, that setup from earlier. It played dividends to hear all that stuff because it kind of makes the ending make a lot of sense. And it makes his actions of killing the other two make a lot more sense, because you can put together that he had grabbed the other two prior, probably had the first girl, Christine, also there, probably playing essentially the same role that she was before, like being like, I don't know if, I don't know if we should be doing this, like that always like self-doubt of, like, I don't want to talk about it. It's an uncomfortable thing to talk about. And again, it's all that voice just saying, like, he doesn't want to talk about it. He doesn't want to remember what happened to him in this scenario. So again, this movie was really good. I definitely would recommend checking it out. I would give this movie either an 8 or even possibly a 9 out of 10. I really, really like this movie. It's really good. So yeah, high recommendation from me. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And that is my review for An Eye for an Eye 3, and if there's I might consider checking out the previous two just because of how solid this one was. And if there's another fourth one in the future, I'll probably look into that one as well. That's how much I enjoyed this movie. So, again, high recommendations of seeing the movie. And yeah, anyway, really high score. And that is my review, as I mentioned. And if you like this review, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, make sure to check out that link in the description. I'll head you over to my Patreon page, and any donations are greatly appreciated. Until next time, everyone, bye-bye.